March the 1st, 2026, the Arabian Sea. Inside the Combat Direction Center of the USS Abraham Lincoln, the ambient lighting is a sterile, low-intensity blue. The room smells of stale coffee, ozone from the server racks, and the faint, permanent odor of unwashed coveralls. The tactical action officer is staring at a tactical display when a new track symbol violently flashes onto the screen. It is not a drone. It is not a low-flying cruise missile. The system classifies the trajectory based on speed and altitude. It is a ballistic missile, and it is descending from the stratosphere at Mach 10, aimed directly at a floating city of 5,000 exhausted Americans. Seconds later, the 1MC public address system across the 100,000-ton carrier clicks open. Three solid, ascending electronic tones blast through every passageway, berthing compartment, and engineering space. It is the alarm for General Quarters. General Quarters, General Quarters, all hands man your battle stations. The route of travel is forward and up to starboard, down and aft to port. Reason for General Quarters, inbound ballistic threat. On March 1, 2026, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps launched 4 ballistic missiles targeting the USS Abraham Lincoln. While the political world debated the geopolitical ramifications, and while CENTCOM and the IRGC fought an information war over the success of the strike, the reality inside the carrier strike group was purely mechanical, mathematical, and terrifyingly human. How does a naval fleet defend itself against a weapon falling from the edge of space at thousands of miles per hour? What is the exact sequence of events when a carrier strike group enters a ballistic missile defense engagement? And what is the physical and psychological reality for the 19-year-old sailor locked behind a steel watertight door, waiting for an impact they cannot see, cannot fight, and cannot run from? In this documentary, we are stripping away the political rhetoric of the Middle East conflict. We are breaking down the brutal, high-speed physics of a ballistic missile attack. You will learn the algorithms of the Aegis Combat System, the extreme physical demands of setting material condition zebra, and the horrifying reality of the carrier's terminal point defense systems. We will examine the absolute reliance of the aircraft carrier on its escort destroyers, and the psychological toll of fighting a war where survival is decided by microseconds and software code. This is the unvarnished logistical and human truth of defending Hull number 72. And to understand the sheer terror of an anti-ship ballistic missile, an ASBM, you must understand the physics of its flight path. Unlike a cruise missile, which skims 10 feet above the ocean's surface at subsonic speeds, a ballistic missile is essentially a space vehicle. When a missile is launched from a mobile erector launcher deep inside Iranian territory, it is propelled upward by massive solid rocket boosters. It leaves the Earth's atmosphere, entering the exosphere. The boosters burn out and detach. The warhead, often a maneuverable re-entry vehicle, reaches the apogee of its parabolic arc hundreds of miles above the Earth. Then gravity takes over. The warhead falls back toward the ocean, accelerating to hypersonic velocities, often exceeding Mach 10, or roughly 7,600 miles per hour. From the moment of launch to the moment of impact in the Arabian Sea, the entire timeline is compressed into roughly 10 to 12 minutes. The USS Abraham Lincoln, despite its immense size and its air wing of F-35C and F-18 strike fighters, cannot shoot down a ballistic missile. An aircraft carrier is an offensive airfield. Its defensive capabilities are strictly limited to short-range, last-resort systems. To survive a ballistic threat, the carrier relies entirely on its bodyguards, the Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyers and Ticonderoga-class cruisers that form the defensive perimeter. These escorts are equipped with the Aegis Combat System, the most sophisticated naval defense network ever engineered. The heart of Aegis is the Spy-1 or Spy-6 radar system. These massive, flat octagonal plates bolted to the superstructure of the destroyer do not physically rotate. They are phased array radars, emitting thousands of electromagnetic beams per second, scanning the atmosphere and the edge of space simultaneously. When the IRGC launched their 4 missiles on March 1st, the thermal bloom of the rocket engines was instantly detected by American early warning satellites in orbit. That data was downlinked to the carrier strike group. Instantly, the Aegis destroyers shifted their spy radars to stare directly at the threat vector. Inside the Combat Information Center, or CIC, of the escort destroyer, the atmosphere is intensely quiet. There is no shouting. There is only the rapid clicking of keyboards and the clipped, formal terminology of warfare. The missile system's supervisor, often a sailor in their early 20s, watches the radar tracks solidify. The Aegis computer algorithm is actively calculating the speed, altitude, and projected impact point of the 4 incoming warheads. It predicts their trajectory using complex orbital mechanics. The destroyer must engage the threat while it is still in the mid-course phase of flight, while it is still in space. To do this, the ship utilizes the Standard Missile 3 or SM-3. The SM-3 is not a traditional explosive missile. It does not carry a warhead filled with C4. It is a kinetic kill vehicle. It is designed to physically collide with the incoming ballistic warhead in the vacuum of space. At a combined closure speed of over 15,000 miles per hour, the kinetic energy of the collision is so massive that it vaporizes both objects instantly. It is literally hitting a bullet with a bullet. When the tactical parameters are met, the commanding officer of the destroyer authorizes the engagement. Batteries released. On the weather deck of the destroyer, the steel hatches of the Mark 41 vertical launch system snap open. A massive pillar of fire and toxic exhaust erupts from the deck as the SM-3 blasts out of its cell. The noise is a physical force, vibrating the entire hull of the ship. The missile pitches over and accelerates toward the stratosphere, guided by the ship's radar until its own onboard infrared seeker opens its mechanical eye to find the heat of the incoming warhead against the cold background of space. But while the destroyers fight the mathematical war in the exosphere, a completely different, intensely physical war is being fought inside the hull of the USS Abraham Lincoln. When the general quarters alarm sounds, the carrier transforms from an industrial workplace into a sealed fortress. The primary objective is survivability. If the Aegis shield fails and a ballistic warhead breaches the hull, the ship must be able to absorb the kinetic and explosive damage without sinking. This is achieved by setting material condition zebra. An aircraft carrier is a labyrinth of over 3,000 compartments, connected by miles of passageways and hundreds of vertical ladder wells. Under normal operations, the ship is open, allowing the crew to move freely and the massive ventilation systems to circulate air. When Zebra is ordered, every single watertight door, every steel hatch, and every ventilation damper on the ship must be violently slammed shut and locked down. There are thousands of these closures on the Lincoln. A steel watertight door is not a normal door. It weighs hundreds of pounds. It is secured by a mechanism called a dog, a series of heavy steel latches that must be physically cranked tight to press the rubber gasket against the steel frame, creating an airtight and watertight seal. When the 1MC blasts, the crew has exactly 12 minutes to set condition Zebra ship-wide. For the junior enlisted sailors, this is a grueling, frantic physical sprint. Mechanics drop their wrenches. Cooks abandon the galley stoves. They race through the passageways, slamming heavy steel doors, spinning the metal wheels, and dogging the hatches tight. Once a hatch is dogged down, you do not open it. The ship is divided into hundreds of isolated, sealed metal boxes. The physical reality of condition Zebra is claustrophobic and suffocating. Because the ventilation dampers are closed to prevent the spread of fire and toxic smoke, the fresh air supply is cut off. The ship is operating in the Arabian Sea, where the ambient outside temperature can easily exceed 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Inside the sealed engineering spaces, the reactor compartments, and the galley, the heat builds up instantly. Within minutes, the temperature in the sealed compartments pushes past 110 degrees. The air becomes thick, heavy, and saturated with the smell of sweat, hot lubricating oil, and the chemical amine scrubbers. 19-year-old sailors sit on the linoleum decks in the dim light of battle lanterns, wearing heavy flame-retardant flash hoods and thick Kevlar helmets. They are completely isolated. They have no windows. They have no radar screens. They do not know if the Interceptor missiles launched by the destroyers hit their targets. They only know that they are locked in a steel box, sweating profusely, waiting to feel the physical impact of a ballistic missile striking the roof. The psychological weight of that helplessness is crushing. It strips away the illusion of control. You are entirely at the mercy of a computer algorithm on a destroyer 10 miles away. Above their heads on the 4.5-acre flight deck, a different kind of desperation plays out. The flight deck of the Lincoln is a crowded parking lot of F-35C Lightning IIs, F-18 Super Hornets, and E-2D Hawkeye radar planes. If a ballistic missile is inbound, or if the carrier must execute violent, high-speed evasive maneuvers, unsecured aircraft become lethal 30-ton wrecking balls. The aviation bosun's mates, the blue shirts, swarm the deck. They drag heavy metal chocks and massive steel tie-down chains across the non-skid surface. Every aircraft must be physically chained to the steel deck plates. The exhaust from running jets burns their faces. The noise is deafening. They are operating completely exposed on the roof of the ship, looking up at a sky that might momentarily deliver a hypersonic warhead. There is no armor on the flight deck. If the ship is hit, the flight deck crew will bear the absolute brunt of the devastation. They work with frantic, synchronized precision, throwing chains over landing gear struts, ratcheting them tight, and running to the next jet. As the clock ticks down the 10-minute window, the engagement enters its most terrifying phase, the terminal phase. If the SM-3 interceptors fired by the destroyers miss the warheads in space, whether due to decoys, maneuverability, or software errors, the warheads re-enter the atmosphere. They are now falling directly toward the carrier strike group. At this point, the carrier must rely on its own localized point defense systems. The Aegis destroyers will fire SM-6 missiles, designed to intercept targets in the final seconds of their descent within the atmosphere. But if a warhead breaks through that final ring, the USS Abraham Lincoln's automated defenses take over. This is not a human operation. Human reaction time is too slow to track an object moving at Mach 10 just miles from the ship. The carrier's combat systems are placed in auto-special mode. The ship's internal computers are given the authority to fire weapons autonomously. The ship's rolling airframe missile ram launchers spin on their mounts, tracking the thermal signature of the falling warhead. The evolved Sea Sparrow missiles, ESSM, automatically launch from their box canisters on the catwalks, creating a wall of proximity-fused shrapnel in the air. And finally, the Phalanx Close-In Weapons System, the CIWS. The CIWS is a radar-guided 6-barrel 20mm Gatling gun. It fires 3,000 to 4,500 rounds of tungsten armor-piercing ammunition per minute. When the CIWS fires, it sounds like a massive canvas sail being ripped in half by a chainsaw. The vibration of the gun shakes the steel structure of the carrier. It is the absolute last line of defense. It engages targets at ranges of less than a mile. If the CIWS is firing at a ballistic missile, it means the warhead will impact the water or the ship in less than 2 seconds. Even if the CIWS shreds the warhead, the kinetic momentum of the debris falling at hypersonic speed will still act like a shotgun blast against the flight deck of the carrier. On March 1, 2026, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps publicly claimed that their 4 ballistic missiles successfully struck the USS Abraham Lincoln. It was a statement designed for domestic consumption and geopolitical leverage. United States Central Command, CENTCOM, issued an immediate and clinical denial. The official statement confirmed that the IRGC had indeed launched the missiles, verifying the intent and the physical attempt to sink an American supercarrier. However, CENTCOM explicitly stated that no missiles impacted the carrier and no casualties or damage were sustained. The Aegis shield had held. The algorithms worked. The interceptors found their targets in the black sky above the Arabian Sea. The information war raged on social media and international news networks. Analysts debated radar cross-sections and the capability of Iranian solid-fuel boosters. But inside the hull of CVN-72, the reality of the aftermath was profoundly unglamorous. When the threat is neutralized, the Combat Direction Center issues the order to secure from general quarters. Set material condition yoke. The adrenaline crash is immediate and physical. For the thousands of sailors locked inside the sweltering, unventilated compartments, the order means survival. The heavy steel dogs are cranked open. The watertight doors are pushed wide. The massive ventilation fans spin back up, flooding the stale, chemical-smelling passageways with fresh, air-conditioned oxygen. The sailors take off their heavy Kevlar helmets and flash hoods. Their coveralls are soaked through with sweat. They are physically exhausted, their hands cramped from spinning the steel wheels of the hatches. There is no grand celebration. There are no speeches. They walk back to the mess decks, grab a plastic tray, and stand in line to eat reconstituted powdered eggs and heavily salted ham. The aviation mechanics return to the flight deck, unchain the F-18s, and resume their maintenance logs. The hull technicians return to the bilges. The ship returns to its relentless industrial 24-hour cycle. The attack on March 1st was not a movie sequence. It was a violent, complex mathematical equation solved by exhausted humans operating highly volatile machinery. It proved that the concept of an impenetrable aircraft carrier is a myth. The carrier is simply the protected center of a highly stressed, incredibly expensive defensive network. The IRGC launch was a reminder that the ocean is not a sanctuary. For the crew of the USS Abraham Lincoln, the deployment continues. They will sleep in aluminum pans stacked 3 high. They will breathe air scrubbed by chemicals. And they will live